Well, this is Ken Zebarah, and welcome everybody to our Thursday evening Zoom sessions, Michigan Solar Stories and other renewable energy topics. And, first thing I've got to do is to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Harvest Solar, Michigan Solar Solutions, and Chart House. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm reading off the wrong list. Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, and Sri Energy. But tonight we have I think, a kind of a special program by our three of our business members who are going to give us a market update on solar and batteries. And so tonight we're going to have Mark Hagerty from Michigan Solar Solutions, Ken Zebarah from Harvest Solar, and Rob Rafson from Chart House Energy. After each presentation, there'll be time for a few questions, and then hopefully by the end we'll still have time for some additional questions. Kind of please mute yourself until we get to the question and answer period. And with that, we're going to start out with Mark, and then have Ken, and then Rob. So, Mark, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, John. My name is Mark Hagerty, Michigan Solar Solutions. Started the company 18 years ago. Currently have two offices, one in Commerce Township, which is Oakland County, and one in Riverdale, which is in Gratiot County. The last couple of years, as John and I were just talking, have been very crazy. We call it the solar coaster. A lot of you have probably heard that, a lot of ups and downs. One thing we've noticed is that in the last couple of years, there's been a decrease in the public approval for solar, and it's the first time I'd seen that. And it seemed like from the advent of starting the company on, more and more people believed in solar. And internally, we think there's two main reasons. The first and biggest is when times were really good, a lot of dishonest companies joined the marketplace. A lot of companies that wanted to sit at your table, charge you twice as much for the system, which seriously, some of them were quoting twice as much as it was worth. They were overpromising what the system would produce, and they were overpromising the savings on the monthly bill. And to combat that, we offered a how to pick a solar contractor document, which explains how to compare quotes apple to apple utilizing PV watts and what insurances and licensing they needed. And we changed our advertising to like, solar is not free, but it's a great investment if you have the right home. The second reason we believe is that with the new RPS, unlike the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard in 2008, which had a carve out for the utilities to create incentives to incentivize people to put solar on their home, this one didn't have the carve out. And people are seeing these massive solar fields being put up on farmland and hear rumors about them going in state forests. Our Riverdale office is farmland, and it's down the street from one of these. And we've had a lot of people stop by and tell us what they think of it. So those two together, I believe, help in tarnishing the image, but we can correct it because it's not too dramatic. Now, also recently, interest rates went up. Last couple of years, we all know that. What that did was it really helped purge a lot of the dishonest solar contractors, or most of them weren't even contractors, they were sales companies, from the market. They could no longer show, even stretching what the solar will do, stretching what the monthly savings would be. They could no longer show a return that would allow customers to feel comfortable signing the contract. So at least 6 to 8 of these people or these companies have gone out of business over the last couple of years. That left a lot of systems out there without people to service them. We've serviced over 300 systems that these customers installed and tried to leave in the customers' minds a very positive experience. So we're over that hump. Most of the companies that are left are friends. We have mutual respect for each other. One of the gentlemen on this call and I just went diving for a week with our wives. I love that. That's how it should be. So the technology over the last few years has also changed dramatically. I remember telling people for many, many years that batteries are way too expensive. Just wait. Just wait. There are billions of dollars being spent in research and development by the automotive industries, the utility companies, and others, and soon it will be much more affordable. Then the concept of a microgrid came up, and they are the winning technology for batteries is lithium. Now, what people don't realize about lithium is that there are about 11 different types of lithium technologies. Some of them were used in the hovercrafts, the hoverboards, you know, of that caught fire, and Sony laptops, and that's not what is used in our industry. Our industry uses lithium iron phosphate, which is much more stable. It's got a long lifespan, higher power density, reduced heat, which makes it much safer. The cost of lithium over the last couple of years, since November of 2022, has gone down 87%. So the cost of lithium going down 87% reminds, I'm sure, the other installers on the call here of what solar did 15 years ago. The prices plunged over the span of a few years. The batteries have started coming down. The warranties are starting to get a little better. Also, lithium iron phosphate is less chemicals are used from the countries that are troubled in the world, not like the blood diamonds or anything like that. The countries that supply the main chemicals are much more stable. We started noticing also that there's a very high desire from people to disconnect from the grid, almost a romantic desire to divorce from the man. About 12 years ago, we did a job that I thought was the coolest job ever. It was a ground mount array, but we put it on top of a brand new construction building. Imagine Cinnamon Royal Oak. Instead of cementing it in the ground or ballasting it on a roof, we hooked it to the building steel, 4 foot over the deck, 30-degree angle. It was, I thought it was really cool. At the same time, we did a small little cabin, a 2-panel system, and with the guy will never have to be connected to the grid. And I posted both of them on Facebook. I fully expected everyone to acknowledge what I acknowledge. This job is really cool. Well, all the comments were about the 2 little panel system and never having to be connected to the grid. So that really resonated in my mind. Then the microgrid comes up. Now, microgrid concept has been around for many years. I remember 12, 15 years ago, all the Air National Guard bases in Michigan put microgrids in. We quoted on the one in Grayling. But what used to be viable but not financially achievable is now financially achievable. We've been doing them regularly. Microgrid is a slight different design and different components. The solar, for one, typically you want solar all south. You generate extra power, it goes to the grid. But if the grid goes down and you are relying on your microgrid, midday, when you'd send power to the grid, your system will open circuit and not function until your loads have depleted the battery or you need the power. So east-facing panels and west-facing panels kind of lower the bell curve of daily production, spreading the base so that it starts earlier in the morning and lasts later in the evening. So if we had the perfect scenario, which is rarely achievable, we like to do a ground mount array with half the panels facing southeast, half the panels facing southwest. That way at the winter solstice, which is the design concern for being off-grid in Michigan, in the summer, you'll be uncomfortable if you don't have enough power to run your air conditioning, and some people might have a health condition with that. But in the winter, if you have no power, you could freeze to death. So the winter solstice and those months surrounding it are the design consideration for just about everything with a microgrid. So half the panels facing southeast, What happens is when the sun rises at the winter solstice and around that time, the system can be powered, or the home can be powered from the solar sooner, taking a load off the batteries. And then when it sets at night, the southwest facing panels will power the system longer and allow more battery capacity for the evening hours. We like to put it at about a 40-degree angle, which we know that's not enough to be perpendicular to the winter solstice, but there's like a happy medium. If we go at 57 degrees, it's such a wind sail that the foundation requirements are unobtainable a lot of times for most people's budgets, but it will shed snow a lot better at 40 degrees. And let's see, we also start out with the intelligent load panel, the power panel, the fuse box. An intelligent panel you can program so that the moment the grid goes dead, you might not even know, but it will automatically turn off what you've designated as not critical loads. And then you get a text or an email or whatever you prefer. Notice the grid went down, and you click on the app and it shows how many hours and minutes your batteries will power the loads that you still have running. You can go through the app and shut off more loads if you want to increase that amount of power, and it'll toggle up as you do it. From there, of course, the solar, as I just mentioned, faced in different directions, and then the batteries. Now, last but not least, we integrate a generator. Now, the generator is controlled by the battery management system. So when the batteries start getting depleted, it lets the generator know, generator kicks on, stabilizes, and switches loads. And then when the batteries have been charged by either solar or the generator, then it'll switch the generator off and run all the loads from your battery and your solar. In the future. Now, in the future, solar is going to transform to BIS, Building Integrated Solar. We've seen solar shingles, solar glazing on glass that actually are solar panels. We'll have solar siding. And phase inverters years ago came out with a solar driveway, little hexagon blocks that fit together to make the driveway. So with this building integrated solar, then our business will change a little bit. We'll still do the retrofits and whatnot, but we will mainly be wiring all these individual trades back to the fuse box or breaker panel in the home that will have internal inverters inside the breaker panel to terminate these different building integrated solar components. So it'll take many years, but I believe that when my grandkids have their grandkids and they're watching movies on TV, old movies, they'll see these sticks next to the road with strings between them. And they'll think, what is that? Grandpa, what is that? And let them know it's a power pole. That's for electric lines. What's electricity? Because they won't even be plugging things into the wall. We all know we can charge our phone by setting it on a pad. At the consumer show in Vegas a few years back, they powered a TV on the wall by a pod inside the wall. EVs can now charge 11 inches above the charging pad. So with this, imagine once we have the ability, which from what I read is sooner than later, to charge at a rate quicker than discharge. We'd be able to jump in a car in Portland, Maine, and drive to Portland, Oregon, without ever having to stop to refuel or recharge. All we would do is we'd get an email or some notice or automatic debit to our account from every electric supplier along the way that knew the IP address of our car and the power that we pulled from their portion of the grid to get to where we were going. Let's see. That is about it, I guess. The future is sunny.
Hey, thanks, Mark. And let's take just a couple questions and then we'll move on to Ken Zebarah. Does anybody have a question for Mark before we move on? If so, please raise your virtual hand, which you can find down in the React buttons at the bottom of your screen. Okay, I didn't, oh, what, okay, Dave, go ahead.
Just snuck that one in. Mark, can you comment on heat pumps and that sort of technology?
Sure, absolutely. Our office in Riverdale, we got to be net zero. We got it to be net zero because we put in the air-to-air heat pumps. That way it uses the electricity. A heat pump is the most efficient way to heat a home that I'm familiar with. I haven't heard of anything that's more efficient. So absolutely, heat pumps, of course, insulating, all of that in order to, for a customer to buy a microgrid and to put the money that it costs to have it put in, they need to do those items first, the insulation, the heating system. Heat pump is definitely on top of the list there.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee. Leandre?
You're muted, Lee. Here you go.
Have you installed a any kind of a combined heat and power where in the wintertime a a Stirling engine or some other kind of heat generating and electricity generated system would charge the battery as well as heat the house?
We did a beta job for a Japanese automotive supplier, actually, and it was in a home of one of their engineers in, I believe it was Troy, and it did just what you said. It would generate the heat, they'd pull the heat off. Our issue was, what do we do in the summer with it? So we recommended that if he didn't have a hot tub or a pool, get a hot tub or a pool, and then that way he would have a use for the heat in those times. But uh,
Well, but with solar, you wouldn't need to run it at all in the summer. It'd be the same as my gas furnace, which doesn't get used for months and months.
yeah, yeah,
Thank
if
you.
it's sized right, they wanted it to run year round though. So it was a design consideration that the think tank all sat around and what could we recommend? But you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Let's move on to, we'll have time hopefully at the end for some more questions and answers, but Ken Zebarah, why don't you go ahead and give us your 10 minutes, 15 minutes of market update.
Sounds good. Hey guys, might be 6 or 7 minutes. We'll see if I can get 10 or 15 out.
Oh, it's six.
Well, if you don't know me or Harvest Solar, I work for Harvest Solar, and I have for about 13 years now. And we're based in Jackson, Michigan, and we've always kind of worked with farmers. We do a lot of we do some residential and a lot of like manufacturers and commercial industrial applications, but we've kind of always been known to have a good reputation in a lot of projects in the farming community. Um, as kind of a side note to start it off, one of the coolest projects we're doing right now that I'm excited about is at a big dairy in central Michigan for their digester operation. So I just think it's really cool out of principle that, you know, where the farm is taking their manure and making natural gas with it, and the process that turns it into natural gas is partially powered by the solar array. And that's a really cool one, and so I'm excited to kind of see that get finished up. Um, but as a company and as the industry, at least from our perspective, we've really grown into more of the commercial industrial stuff, and it's been exciting and a lot of different changes. But we've gone from about 8 to about 100 employees, and it's just been, like Mark said, the solar coaster. We use that term. It's like it seems like I hear it every day. Um, and so it's been. If anybody's ever near Jackson, anybody on the call, let me know. I'd be happy to show you around the place. Um, One of the biggest things I've seen over the last few years or decade or so um, is significant growth in just the understanding from kind of all the all the indirect players in these projects, the financiers, local electrical inspectors, state electrical inspectors, the kind of lower level or interconnection department utility engineers and utility people. not on the policy side necessarily, maybe that too, but just in their understanding of how these projects work and how they get interconnected and the complexities and the process. I've seen a lot of we've seen a lot of growth in that type of role. The distributed generation limit going up to 550 AC has been huge. In the commercial industrial space, that's been huge. There's a lot of big manufacturers, big farms, warehouses, cold storage, things like that, that easily can take advantage of 5, 6, 700 kilowatts that were previously limited to the 150 AC. Batteries, I agree that's that's the next big frontier, or however you want to put it. But I agree with what Mark said about the storage. But admittedly, I need to step it up, and I'm not a battery expert. On the commercial side, on the larger storage side, I'm not an expert, and I can acknowledge that I need to educate myself more about that. But I think kind of a bittersweet side to that is I think a big reason for that is because there's been so much low hanging fruit the last 4, 5, 6 years. So I think with different with different legislation and the past administration, there's been a lot of projects that have been able to kick off that don't need batteries to be cost effective or anything like that. But I do think that the industry and myself personally and Harvest Solar as a company, that's definitely the next big step for a lot of reasons. And it's on the commercial side, it's starting to be, and it's going to be not necessarily, it's probably the least functionality will be backup battery or backup power for outages. It's definitely going to be like arbitrage and kind of the timing aspect, peak demand shaving, and taking advantage of time of use rates and things like that. Some other changes that I've seen significantly. This is not going to surprise anybody here, but electric rates have gone up. Residential and commercial, not only have they gone up, but it was honestly a bigger deal than I maybe expected. Maybe not the people on this call, but it was a bigger deal than I expected to when they changed the way they credit the DG credits to the whole bill. And we're seeing some different ways that the peak demand charges are credited in the DG program. So there have been some improvements there. Module power density, that's no surprise either, but that's been a big one. When I started, we were installing 200, 220 watt panels, maybe 230s, and now they're 540 to 600 watt, give or take. So that's been a big one. You simply need less ground space, less roof space for the same output. The monitoring and controls too, especially on the commercial industrial side, there's a lot of non-export situations. And when you're outside of DG and you're non-export, keeping the energy behind the meter, being used in a facility all the time, it gets rather complicated. And the complications or the controls and monitoring and software to address those complications have improved a lot the last few years. If you have a 1 megawatt array, for example, that is at a manufacturer, and that 1 megawatt array your agreement with the utility and the way it's designed is to only be behind the meter and never export. And so to do that, as you approach the possibility of exporting, the inverters have to curtail, have to ramp down, and then there's other controls that kind of handle that and stop the export. So I've learned a lot about that aspect, and I think that that part of the industry has been a big change, at least from what I've seen. And then service and O&M is it is a big one, I think, for the future, that I think a lot of companies, maybe some people on this call, are kind of going to that, and addressing some of the service and O&M. We are getting some O&M contracts, but as these, whether they're big solar farms or pink energy uh, installs that need service, I think that's a big need in the industry. I think that these projects are kind of getting built, whether it's residential or solar farms. A lot of them are getting built and not really addressing the O&M or the potential service on the front end. So we get a lot of service calls, and a lot of them that we either can't or don't have interest in addressing. Um, and and then kind of on the mindset, I wanted to touch on, like Mark was saying, the mindset and the perception of solar lately has been wild. We specifically market to farmers and talk to farmers every day. So, imagine, soliciting a farmer for solar, and they immediately throw you out and yell at you. And then you say, hold on, I'm not taking your farmland. I just want to do a small array to get rid of some of your electric bill, and they say, oh, all right. I guess you can talk to me. But it's been a challenging, and then then I have to decide, okay, do I want to really argue with this person and dispel the myths that are in their head, or is it worth it or not? But there's been obviously a big change in that mindset. Like Mark said too, the same with some of the more unethical kind of fly-by-night companies that flooded the market, that just have put a bad taste in people's mouth. So we've seen that, and we've all, this whole group, professionally and personally, have had to battle through that misinformation and those different companies. I have seen, a, on the commercial industrial side, I think we've all seen a lot of this, but I see on the mindset side of things, um, I'm still having to educate businesses on the fact that solar is cost effective more than I should have to. So, for example, I might get a call from a facilities manager at a manufacturer that says, "Hey, my boss's boss told me that I have to look into solar, and I'm just doing this to check my box. But I know it's just for tree huggers and whatever." And I get to tell them, well, I mean, I'm glad you're looking into it, but actually it will be cost effective and a good return on your investment. And they kind of perk up and they say, oh, I didn't realize, I just assumed that it was a corporate green energy initiative, for environmental reasons and not financial. And it still is surprising to me how often business owners and the general public are surprised that solar is actually cost effective. It is improving greatly, but I'm still surprised at how many. Boy, I got some notes here. I could go on for days. But that's pretty much my
Thanks,
let me
Ken.
answer.
Let's take a question from Jay. Go ahead, Jay.
Very good, and this is directed to anyone who wishes to answer. But what's on the horizon with regard to the flow battery, FLOW? It is a liquid battery. It does require a pump. These are generally buried underground so that they can work in all environments, whether in the desert heat or Canadian winters. It also means that the battery is out of sight and very safe. But what's on the horizon for flow batteries, in particular for residential use? And they are used primarily right now in large commercial farms, but I would expect that, as most things that start in large commercial environments, it tends to migrate and find its way to residential use. And just as an aside, I run a hybrid home, 1600 amp hours of lithium iron phosphate, powering all the low voltage items around the house. You'd be surprised how much of it runs directly off of 12 volts or with a DC-DC buck boost regulator to bring it up to 19 for laptops and HDMI monitors. But all of my low voltage stuff is on battery. Only my big ticket items, refrigerator, freezer, HVAC, electric stove, CPAP, or air conditioner. Those are on the big inverter system. But I try to stay away from AC inverters because that is a single point of failure. But what's on the horizon for flow batteries?
Yeah, go
Well,
ahead, Rob. Looks
I
like
think
Rob.
I think that the key to think about the flow or the flow type batteries, which is basically putting the energy into a liquid and then storing the liquid for long periods of time. This is a technology that I think will be scaled up on the utility scale size. I don't see it ever really hitting the residential or even commercial scales because there are other better, lower maintenance, simpler options. But the big reason that the utilities are going to be interested in it is because you can actually do seasonally adjusting large amounts of energy. And so for them, it's important to be able to shift some of the summer peak solar productions and push it into the fall and winter.
Yeah, John, go ahead with your question. John Gorley.
Hi, did you call on me, John?
I did.
Yeah, okay. Your voice was muffled. I'm sorry. Hi, Ken. Since you mentioned time of day rates and arbitrage, it made me wonder if you're aware of any inverters that are capable of storing energy in batteries during um, uh, 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 low price times, and then draining the battery and pumping electricity back out to the utility during high price times. Have you ever done that? Do you know any companies that make inverters that'll be able to do that?
I don't know of any inverters specifically. Um, Batteries, obviously, would do that, and we have one good large commercial example of that near Grand Rapids, and we'll be doing more of that in the near future. I don't know of any specifically inverters doing that. Maybe Rob or somebody may.
Yeah, well, basically any batteries, any inverter that has battery storage can do it. And in fact, what's very exciting is that I think the biggest change in the world is going to be EVs and their ability to store and put power back onto the grid. By 2030, we're going to see 1 million electric vehicles in Michigan, and that will equal one entire day if they're for all of generation, for all uses. And that will allow us to shift energy from one period of time to another.
So can you name a specific manufacturer of inverters that can do it? Because I've failed to find any.
All of them.
All of them. Certainly not my Outback inverter.
It should.
No, it doesn't. The company has told me.
Okay. Well, we can, if you want to talk about that in detail offline.
Offline, sure. I'm happy to do that.
Contact me. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Rob. Kind of give us your perspective on going on in the market.
Sure. I'm Rob Rafson, Charthouse Energy. We do the larger end of the commercial industrial scale of solar. And most recently, I've been wanting to put solar on churches for 20 years, and I started with a group, Solar Faithful, to help churches adopt solar. And I think by the end of next year, we should have doubled the number of churches in Michigan that have solar. But yes, I think that the biggest things that are changing, and one of the thing that's most important is there are 10 or 12 states in the nation that have, when Trump 1.0 got out of the Paris Climate Initiative, this state signed up along with about 10 other states. And what's interesting, that just got back from today from the MI Healthy Climate Conference. And one of the things that was most fascinating to me about that discussion was there were several people that were in from Washington, D.C. And their comment was that this state is the only state in the country that every department in government has a plan to meet their the clean air, meaning reduced carbon, in every department in the state. So it's what everybody needs to do, and it's becoming a blueprint for every other state. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out. But we've got a group of legislators and individuals and corporations and everybody seeing this as not just a nice thing, but a necessity for our combined future. And so I expect a continued support by both legislation and regulation to support both distributed generation and utility scale and every other type of mechanism to get solar and wind and other technologies. So I think that the key here is I think it's one of the realities that we're going to come to very soon is the expectation that this administration is going to defund the incentives. I think it may be painful for 1 year, but probably not, because I think that the price, by having those lofty goals, I think we're going to have a very interesting time in the state, because to meet those high goals, we're going to have a very significant increase in electric rates in the next year, or in the next 4 years. I think that we're likely double the price of electricity in 4 years, and that will make the economics of doing solar viable, no matter what the incentives are. And let's see, and then there's one other interesting thing I heard of 1 or 2 counties in the state, and I feel that other counties are going to pick this up, that are requiring that the solar on all new buildings. California's done this and they backed off a little bit, but it's interesting that we're starting to see that sort of idea here in the state. That's what I got.
Thanks, Rob. Let's go to Dave. Dave Reuter, go ahead with your question.
Well, it's not so much a question as it was just an add-on. Somebody was mentioning that the electric vehicles, GM and Ford, both on their premium vehicles, the top-end vehicles, have bidirectional capability now. So you can run your home from the vehicle using the vehicle's battery. And in that inverter, they also are doing some load shifting and things like that if you have the home battery system as well as the vehicle battery.
Right. And
put that in there.
Right. The expectation is by the 2027 model year, we're expecting all of the EVs in the world to be bidirectional. And probably some look backs of technologies to get the existing electric vehicles. The biggest challenge is it's in the socket of the EV, but that
Well, it's in the AV software as well.
as right.
Yeah, so they probably won't update the older EVs, but they will probably eventually start moving it further down the lower levels. But right now, it's only the premium brands.
Yep. So the biggest thing also with EVs and other behind distributed energy generation resources, DERs, that's solar and storage, is we're going to see right now this year virtual power plant legislation, which is the aggregation of resources. And that's going to allow a group of people that have solar and or just solar, or solar and storage, or whatever, or an EV, to all combine their services and provide services to both the utilities and the grid operators, meaning transmission level. So there's opportunities to provide basically a power plant, but it's spread out amongst all of these people that are in the grid.
Hey, Rob, Ken or Mark, do you know, we of course hear a lot about tariffs these days, and some are obviously targeted at solar systems and components. And do you see that being a problem, that it would raise prices significantly? What's your kind of take on how tariffs might affect your business?
There are a couple of the battery manufacturers that relied exclusively on China for their components and a couple that haven't. So I think we're going to see a shift in the procurement of those devices to more onshore devices. And luckily, there are a few now. 10 years ago, we had no choice for onshore. Few years prior to that, we did. We had Evergreen Solar, we had Sonova, we had Solar World. There were a bunch of domestically made components. I mentioned for a moment about the bidirectional meters. That is exciting. We did a few dozen of these for Ford. We did some out at their engineering center and for their engineers, and then Sunrun hired us to go install them for a couple dozen of the people that bought it, and they work great. It really is neat, the integration of these two separate devices towards one common goal.
Yep.
Hey, who's got a question or comment?
Well, there was one in the chat that I love to answer over and over again, is the death spiral, which is when the prices of the utilities go up and the price to get out of getting that resource, meaning solar, goes down. At some point, there's a tipping point where it's so much cheaper to buy into solar than to pay the high price to the utility, that people start migrating more and more rapidly over to the solar, independent solar. And then anybody who's left on the grid has to pay for all of the services and cost of running the grid, and the price accelerates higher, faster. And that's the death spiral. What I actually think is going to happen first is the death spiral for the natural gas supply. We have 50-year-old gas lines, and we're talking billions of dollars a year to update and replace the old steel lines that were put in 50 years ago that are now leaking like a sieve. And as they do that, the cost of that additional work is going to feed into the cost of natural gas, which is going to be pushing people over to heat pumps, which are more efficient and ultimately are less expensive, a good return on investment. There was one other question earlier, just so people have it in their mind. A commercial industrial project for solar is about a 5 to 7 year return on investment, and a residential is between 8 and 10 year return on investment. If it's more than that, you should get additional pricing from other competitors because it should be in those ranges.
There are questions or comments? Just going through the chat room, chat box too to see if there's anything in there. But if you do have a question or comment, just raise your virtual hand. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. I was curious if I know Mark mentioned the generator that was part of the system, and I wonder if the other two guys also in kind of work in the generator as well. I like that. I have one. That's one of the reasons why I'd like to know if that's something that would be able to put into the system.
Absolutely. In fact, we're seeing more and more customers, especially in DTE, who happens to be the worst investor-owned utility in the country for outages. They have the longest and the most number of outages. Consumers is number 5. So collectively, we have the worst state in the nation. And we are seeing a lot of people. It's a very effective way to have long-term uninterruptible power. And so the game is to blend energy storage, a battery, with a generator so that you get to run on the battery for a while and maybe even through the night into the next day. But if there's not enough sun to power your building, you want to have that generator there so that you can continue to operate regardless. And so I think it's a cost-effective solution when uninterruptible power is critical.
Go ahead, Jay, with your question.
With regard to generators, I talk to a lot of people who say, well, I can put in a Generac on natural gas. It'll auto start. I'll have all the power I need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Except, you've laid out $10,000, which would have been better spent on just doing solar to offset even part of your electrical needs. You only use them occasionally. Yes, Michigan sucks big time with DTE and consumers with the number of outages, but they're typically rather short, and most people can live through them quite easily, particularly if they don't happen during the winter. Winter time's another matter. But they're also costly to run. You're going to pay quite a bit in the number of cubic feet of natural gas, just go and have that convenience of still having the lights on. So I recommend to people that it's nice to go and have, say, a 4 kW Generac or something that you can run an extension cord into, if you need it. That's a better investment for a few $100s. But a $10,000 investment in a generator sitting on a concrete pad and hooked into natural gas and full cut over to run the home. I try to talk people out of that and convince them, apply that money towards something that day after day after day will provide you all or part of the energy you're actually going to use. A much more efficient use of your money. And hey, it's cool to run solar, right? But there are certainly limitations in that not everyone can put up solar. I've got neighbors that are totally tree locked. Their lawns in their backyard won't even grow because it doesn't get enough sunlight. And in those cases, yeah, a generator is probably the right bet.
Right, but Jay, the key is that not everybody is handy as you are.
True, I did all my stuff DIY. Yeah,
it is very important. It is very important to be able to service all of the people And I agree with you. Solar is the primary one. A backup generator is if you need it. So we're doing a whole series of food pantries and soup kitchens in Detroit because of the several day or multiple day outages. Right now, the entire northern half of the lower peninsula, there are thousands of people that are still out of power weeks later.
Yeah,
Mhm.
12
Yeah.
counties. Yep.
A substantial portion of that $10,000 that Jay mentioned is for the transfer switch and all the wiring, which is not needed in a microgrid because the battery management system
Right.
handles it.
Does it?
And
Absolutely.
also, most people need the redundancy because there will be equipment failure. There will be days when it's raining for 3, 4 days, or we had a horrible snowstorm. So most people want the comforts of the redundancy of it.
Yeah, we did an all electric house and they felt comfortable to go to Florida for weeks on end and not worry that their all electric house would be okay, even if the power went out. And they have solar but they might have snow on the panels.
Yeah, exactly, Rob. And what you can do is if your generator comes on, you diagnose why did it come on? Could I add another battery? Could I add a couple more
Of
solar
course.
panels? What can I do to make it so the generator only comes on under equipment fail? But without the generator, you can't dial it in that way.
Belt and suspenders.
Yep.
Yes,
So
exactly.
There was a question in the chat about raising your hand, virtual hand, and you should have a bar at the bottom of your screen, and under React, you should be able to find a where you can click and raise your virtual hand. Fred, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, just a little different subject. I'm wondering if anybody has heard of a wind solar hybrid system.
yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the wind portion typically doesn't pay for itself ever. So yes, you can do it. And the modern battery control systems can handle that input as an additional input. And it's relatively easy to do, but the economics are not excellent. You have to get you have to get well above tree line to be able to make it so that the wind is stable enough to produce enough power to make them viable.
Yeah, and I would agree that the economics aren't there, but with the, again, microgrid concept, it gives you the ability to design it better towards the winter solstice when the winds are stronger, there's less
Right.
resistance because there's no leaves on the trees. So it really rounds out a very good microgrid system. The problem with it is the amount of manufacturers out there has dwindled. Almost every manufacturer of grid-tied wind turbines went out of business when the price of silicon plunged back in 2012 through 15.
Yeah, John Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm, putting a solar system on my house, and I had, contractors quote me battery systems, Tesla power walls or the equivalent systems. I just say Tesla because it's the most famous one, right? And I just look at those prices and I did a lot of analysis and I can't see any way to make a reasonable payback on that on a residential system. They're talking, 12 to $15,000. And with the solar, there's not that much left of a bill, to trim down that you can ever pay for it that way. Of course, you're getting backup during power outages, right? But there are a lot cheaper ways to do that if you're willing to deal with a little inconvenience and don't need it to be, instantaneous and automatic. And even if you wanted it, instantaneous and automatic, you can get a backup generator for about the same price and it will never run dead. So
Yeah.
I'm struggling with the economics of batteries. I'm wondering if I missed something, if there's somebody has a different thought on that.
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything. I think that it's a different purchase. People don't buy a generator for return on investment. They buy it for peace of mind. So if you buy a generator, you'll never ever return on investment. You pay a little bit more for the battery to go with your solar. you will have the backup. You will have the ability to self-consume instead of sending power to the grid. You'll have the ability to rate arbitrage. So eventually you will have a return on investment.
Right. And I think that the key with that is that the batteries, the 10 kilowatt hour, or now, as Jay had said in the chat, there's some much bigger batteries. But for me, the big battery you should have is your EV. And you should be able to charge
Which I
and
can't really
discharge.
use that way yet because there's no commercially available system. Until somebody tells me otherwise, I can't find such a thing, right? I keep getting told that
I'll be happy to
technology
get,
exists, you just
I'll,
can't buy it.
I'll be happy to give you a list of bidirectional EV chargers. There's only about 30 of them available right now. 30 different manufacturers have them, and there's about 150 cars worldwide that are bidirectional already.
How many of those are sold in the United States?
All of them. Oh, and there's a couple of Chinese that aren't sold in the United States yet. But I'll
My
give you
understanding was that there's two, right? There's the Nissan Leaf and there's the Ford Lightning.
the Ford Transit van. There's a bunch of ones that are here in the US that are already set up for it. The Lightning truck is the first in the
The
US.
Lightning is, no question.
But there's piles of them. We can get into that separately.
Love to hear about it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, I'm a little late to the meeting, but so I'm in a condo, and there's a condo association, and I'm a renter, and I don't know, years ago I heard that power was deregulated, and I don't know if it's in Michigan, purchased from non-Michigan suppliers. I don't know if it's worthwhile or not. Maybe you can purchase from a solar farm or a community solar. I don't know what my options are.
Right. There was a small window in 2008 to 2011 when they temporarily deregulated a portion of the grid, a portion up to 10%. A lot of commercial industrial guys jumped on the bandwagon, and some residential people did also. And so that's gone, long gone. We are in a regulated state. Other states like Illinois and all of the ones, Iowa, Ohio, all of those are deregulated states, meaning that all the utility does is transmit power. They distribute power, and so you buy from whomever you want, including the utility itself. But so that is not in our state, and I don't expect it to ever be that way again. So your option, however, we do believe that in the next year or two, maybe 3, we'll see the opportunity to get community solar. And once that happens, then you will be able to buy into a community solar array and offset parts of your electric bill. That'll be the mechanism to decrease your costs and go green.
Okay, thank you.
The community solar legislation is a top priority of GLREA for this year, and it's an uphill fight because the utilities hate the idea. Go ahead, Jay.
I purchased 6 EG4 LL-S 48-volt batteries for my system. That's about 30 kWh. It's about 1,000 square foot home. That runs all of my heating needs in the wintertime. That will power my air conditioning during the summer. And of course, in these transitional seasons where I don't need either, it'll last for days. But 30 kWh works in many homes, but they were $1,200 a piece, so I got $7,200 invested. I did not consider that to be excessively costly. They're extremely easy to attach. Once you've got 1 or 2 on a system, adding more can be done with ease without great skill. The inverters will automatically learn of the new capacity, and settings are automatic. But in today or these days of this part of the season, Whatever power I use overnight is completely restored, and I'm no longer charging my battery by noon or 1 p.m. And we're not even into summer yet. So I think batteries are not that costly, but have great benefit in that no need for a generator because I've got a sufficient backup, and I can always shed loads if I want to extend that backup. But yes, I do still have a generator too. But batteries are very affordable.
Jabran, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you seen Rob where it's an opportunity to like where it's optimal for the portable batteries like he just was speaking about, and like solar, small solar plus the batteries? Because like I use the battery the same way. I have one of those commercial, brand like 5 kilowatts, and of course it allows for that immediate like outage for freezers, refrigerators, which is
Yep.
helpful, and it's a low cost entry and it's simple to use. So I think for a lot of people, we're at that phase where that is like a good entry point, and then some people want to go all the way with a gas generator, but that costs. So it's like that's peace of mind and it's there, but the batteries is that immediate, whether it's like, oh man, I got this medicine I need to keep cool
Right.
for a couple of days, or but I'm saying,
100%. In fact,
yeah,
I
but
was I
with
was
the
just down
solar though,
in
I think it's a sweet spot that people are overlooking where you don't get a lot of solar, and they're starting to make these solar generator systems where they tie into the breaker panel, and you right in there where you don't spend more than 10,000, and you can have some resilience, you can have some
right.
emergent backup, you have some solar, and it can do time of use and all that. So
Yeah, those integrated inverter battery charger systems that allow you to plug in either, you know, I was down in the islands and this is blowing up because little cabins all the way up to bigger houses are not even connecting to the grid anymore. They're just rolling one of those puppies in, throwing a couple of panels outside, and they're golden. And then when they find, oh, I really want a chest freezer, I got to buy another one of them. Okay, and I buy a couple of more panels, and we're good. And so the key is that you size those so you can get through the night. Now we're not living in the islands, and we don't have sun every day. So a cabin in the North Woods here, or whatever, a small tiny home can probably get by for all of the spring through fall, no problem. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do for winter. But for most of the year, it's a great option, very inexpensive and very easy to use. And so if you don't have any electrical system and you just want to throw some power in, that's what you want to do.
Well, it's after 8 o'clock, but Ken, you get the last question.
All righty. This is a little bit out of the ordinary. So I'm going to ask if anyone's using fuel cells with or without solar. And while you're thinking on that, chewing on that piece, I met a guy like 25 years ago, and he was using solar with fuel cells, basically to break water into hydrogen and oxygen, whatever. And he was storing the hydrogen slightly compressed in these super large, which look like tanks, really, scuba diving, no gigantic things like bigger than what you have on your house in other places. And then in the winter, he would reverse all that and go back through the fuel cells and create electric generation. So I was curious if anybody thought about that, heard about that, any impact on there.
I have definitely thought about it and followed it. At the Renewable Energy International show about 5 years ago was the first time fuel cells were represented. And at that point, it was still this component by this manufacturer, this component by this manufacturer, so it had to be pieced together. But I see the convergence like we saw in the inverter charger space, where now you can get it all in one box. I think it's critical for something like that. In the future, I think a viable option for our company would be to go back to everybody's system, install a fuel cell, change the solar that was pumping power into the grid to generate the hydrogen, and then that way they could run off of the fuel cell. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of things like
during the
that
winter,
in the
right.
future. And soon as that becomes more viable than it is now, we're going to put it at one of our offices.
Totally agree.
Currently, at our offices, we have a live solar edge system with battery in Riverdale. We've got a live Solarc and Home Grid in Commerce, and also a live in phase with a battery in Commerce. And it's for demonstration. If anyone would like to stop by and see them, we'd love to show it to them. Both are integrated with the intelligent home panels. I enjoy showing it to people with the app and how they integrate together.
Yeah, well, it's 8:05 now, so I think we're going to have to wrap this up. But thank you all for coming. Thank you all for asking your questions and making your comments. And in particular, thanks to Mark and Ken and Rob for kind of giving us their insights into what's going on in the solar and battery markets. Really appreciate it. And, I recorded this session and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel if anybody wants to recommend it to anybody. Hope to see you next week. And again, thanks for coming. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.